What's up? My name is Rich, and if you don't know anything about me or new to the channel, basically I sell t-shirts online full-time from the comfort of my home, and I've been doing that for the past several years. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Did I say my name? My name is Rich. In this video right here, we're gonna discuss the pros and cons to a lot of the t-shirt printing methods. We did go over the printing methods already. I'll go ahead and put that video right here somewhere if you haven't watched that. But we'll go ahead and discuss the pros and cons to those print methods. I think we can elaborate on those a little bit more. The reason being is because I always get asked a lot, what kind of t-shirt business can I start within these budgets? Somebody will ask, what can I do with $500? What can I do with $1,500? What can I do with $5,000? So there are a lot of different things that you can do, but it depends what you want to do before you start planning out your budget. All right. So let's go ahead and discuss some of these printing methods once again. So screen printing, I believe that's the most famous t-shirt printing method. At least that's what I think. So for screen printing, you can print one design multiple times easily and very quickly. So if you're new to selling t-shirts, it's easier to do a screen printing business model for wholesale or B2B if you're starting off, because a lot of those times you're going to be printing for another company who needs a lot of the same design, such as a construction company. They need t-shirts for all of their employees, so they may want 100 t-shirts of the same exact thing. But if you're selling online, and if you're just starting off your brand, or you're just selling general t-shirts like I do, it's kind of hard to sell 100 t-shirts of the same thing right off the bat. If you're just starting up, it's easier to sell 2 or 3 from the very beginning. However, it's going to be a hassle getting your screens and all of that ready just to print 2 or 3 t-shirts. But one thing I did used to do when I had a screen printer, I would wait until I get 2 or 3 sales, then I would print 24 of them. Then I would stock the rest in inventory. So it's very cheap to print a lot. However, if you're only selling 2 to 3, then you're sitting on inventory that you need to sell off. So you really got to keep that in consideration. If you're only trying to sell one-offs, screen printing may not be for you. But if you're going to print a lot from the very beginning, already making sales is always going to be your main issue in this industry. I mean, that's the main issue in every business, right? You got to make sure you're able to acquire those sales before you even jump into any of this. So that's one thing we'll discuss in the budget part later. But screen printing literally has the best results as well. The ink, depending on if you're doing water-based or plastisol, even plastisol still looks great with a screen printer. With screen printing, there's also different types of inks. You can do metallics, you can do puff, you can do a variety of things, and the designs printed can be very intricate. So I think I went a little too deep, but basically the pro of it is you can print a lot of t-shirts for very, very, very cheap. Ink cost is cheap, but you can't really do one-offs. There is a small learning curve with the squeegee. If you push, you pull, the angle that you're pulling at, burning screens, the time that it takes to burn screens. However, after you get through that learning curve and you just want to print a whole bunch of shirts in mass amounts, screen printing may be for you. So be sure to look into that. The screen printer that I had was a Uninet. I bought one of those kits. I think it was a 4x6 or something like that. I paid around $3 or $4 grand. I can't remember the price, but came with 4 platens, I believe 6 screens. It was a whole starter kit. Came with the UV, starter emulsions, starter inks. I think a few starter screens maybe. I'm not too sure. But all in all, for a decent brand new set, it was like $3 or $4 grand to get started. The next thing we'll talk about is dye sublimation. So dye sublimation, the printer that I have is a Sawgrass, and I'll also post a link to this down below. I believe at the time when I paid for it, it was around $800. So it's actually a very reasonable price. You can use dye sub for mugs, polyester shirts. The ink is embedded into the shirt. It does look great, but you are limited on your t-shirt material types. But you can do mugs, you can do socks, you can do headbands and stuff. I'm not going to get too deep into the print methods. I forget we already discussed this before. However, the pro is that it prints out great. I only bought it to use it for mugs, so the size of the paper that I printed out from the Sawgrass, it was not an issue for me. I'm able to gang 2 designs for a mug on 1 sheet of paper. If you wanted to print on a t-shirt, you're limited on your t-shirt choices. You mostly have to work with poly blends or mostly polyester and light colored shirts. I know there is a thing about printing white onto a black shirt and using it to print on dark colors, or I don't know. I don't know. If it's too difficult, I try not to dive deep into it. But the learning curve for it, super quick. All you gotta do is print and press. All you need is the printer and a decent heat press. I always recommend a decent heat press. However, if absolutely necessary, you can start off with one of those Chinese manufactured, sold on Amazon heat press. But I highly recommend investing into a higher end heat press. If you believe in your business and you know you can do this, go ahead and do so. So the price range, depending on your heat press, maybe for a cheap one, $200, for a decent one, at the least $1,000 or so, plus the printer. So for something like this, starting off, you're probably looking around $1,800 to $2,200 or so starting off. But that is if you're buying a decent heat press. So you do want to take that into consideration. Next, we'll discuss direct-to-garment. So as majority of you all know, I'm not a huge fan of direct-to-garment just because of my past experience. However, don't let my past experience ruin your future experience. When I discuss things in videos, it does come from my perspective and my experiences, so it can be subjective. However, I still have to notate it because there are direct-to-garment printers that I did not deal with that sounds like they're still great, and a lot of people still have a lot of success with. So just because it's not for me doesn't mean it's not for you. All right, so direct-to-garment, for a decent printer, you're looking at least like 20 grand. Pros of it: one-off prints, full color, and the ink is awesome. Soft hand fill embedded into the shirt, water-based ink. So that's the pros of it. Awesome full color, one-off prints, and great results, feels great and all of that. However, the con of it is the fact that it's kind of expensive to get into. For a decent printer, you're looking at the least 20 grand. The learning curve, for the most part, you can literally set up out of the box and start printing. However, the con of it is what kind of ruins everything, at least for me. Like I said, maintenance for it is a pain in the butt. You got to prime the nozzles, prep it for print. When it's time to shut down, you got to clean everything up, make sure all these mechanical parts and pieces are all cleaned up. And then you also have to have a pre-treater along with that. That needs maintenance as well because the pre-treatment is thick. It can clog up the nozzles, as well as the white inks for the direct-to-garment printer. It can clog up the nozzles. The direct-to-garment printer, right? Even though you can do one-off shirts and designs, you need to be printing all of the time, or at the least majority of the time. I know there are printers that state that you can leave your printer sitting idle for a couple days and it won't mess up. I don't know about that. I had a printer from a company that stated something similar, and that wasn't necessarily the case, because if you let it sit for a few days and you start it back up, it will start printing again, but you have to prime so much ink through those nozzles that you're wasting money. So it's more important that you have to have your direct-to-garment printing all of the time. So each day you go to work, you might want to use that machine that day. You want to use it Monday, you want to use it Tuesday, you want to use it Wednesday. Screen printing also have some maintenance. You got to clean up at the end, you got to prep stuff up. But once you put it to the side, you know, that's okay on Monday. And then Thursday you want to print, you can print on Thursday. So that is one of the cons. Another con is the fact that even if the learning curve is easy, if something breaks, one little part messes up or something, it's going to ruin everything along with your production. Even if you're a hands-on person, it can be difficult to know what's wrong with it. And majority of the time something is wrong with it. It's usually one little broken part that you can only order from that company, and it may take a day or two for it to arrive to you. And you can ask for overnight shipping. Sometimes they'll do it, sometimes they won't. And when you're backed up a day or two, you're backed up a lot. So that right there alone was one of the bigger cons for me. There are a lot of cons with direct-to-garment for me. However, I won't dive any more deeper into that. But it's going to take around a good 20 grand to get started with direct-to-garment if you're interested in that still. So we still got two more printing methods. The next one is embroidery. Not necessarily printing, but we're talking about stitching, right? I don't have any experience with embroidery, so I can't dive too deep into it, but I have looked into the embroiderer machines before, and we're looking at, for a good one, around like 15 to 20-ish grand. And I'm also going to touch on this a little more in the end of this video, why I never got into it. So I actually asked my good friend Richie with Brands and Empires about embroidery, and he gave me a quick little breakdown, so let me share that with you all. Let's see. So the learning curve is a little strong. Takes a little while to learn. However, most of these companies do give you training. But Richie states, once you learn it, it's consistent. If you know what you're doing, it's consistent. But to get perfect with it, it is a little more involved. You have to be hands-on with it for quite some time before you hand it over to an employee and whatnot, so that it's just making money for you instead of you being the one who's doing the work all of the time. However, for designing and getting the files ready, it's a little different from designing a t-shirt. You have to find a good digitizer, because I've even tried this before I sent off a hat off to an embroiderer. You literally have to point out in software, I don't know the name of the software that I was using at the time, but how the threads sit, right? Because sometimes the threads go left and right, sometimes it goes up and down. You literally have to pick which way you want it to go. And you also have to do the same if you did a stroke. You have to make sure that goes a different way. You have to make sure the machine uses a different color for that. So that's a whole nother learning curve on top of learning the machine, is learning how to digitize a file for the machine. But you can always find somebody to do this, but this usually costs between like 10 to 30 bucks is usually what a digitizer charge per job. So that is something you have to take into consideration. That is a pro, that it is consistent. However, it is a con, the fact that you have another learning curve on top of learning the machine, is learning how to digitize the files for the actual embroidery machine itself. And another thing that Richie mentioned, I had to overemphasize because my name is Rich and his name is Richie. We're actually both Richards, so that makes it even more confusing. But anyways, he also stated you're making about 20 to 30 bucks per head, because the embroidery machine, because a lot of them come with one head. If you want more than one head, you have to pay a little bit extra. So that's why you see a lot of people use multiple heads. That way you can get more jobs done at once. It's kind of similar in a way to direct-to-garment. If you wanted to print more than one t-shirt at once in direct-to-garment, you need a whole nother $20,000 machine. However, with an embroidery machine, it's not as expensive because they do sell machines with more than one head. So those are the pros and cons of that. I think I already discussed the pricings for that. You're looking around 15 to 20 grand for a decent one. I do recall there being somewhere around 7 to 8 grand or so. But you know, it depends what brand you purchase, the reliability of it, and all that. Also, if you're buying new or used. So the next thing is heat transfers, which is what I deal with. And I think heat transfers is one of the greatest ways to start, especially with a low budget, because you can get yourself a little vinyl cutter. I believe the Cameo and the Crickets, the Silhouette and all that's between $300 and $400 new. But what I started with at the time was a US cutter, which was around $400. Just a real quick pros and cons between the two, I really don't know. But the biggest part to me why I never used the Cameo and whatnot is because you couldn't use the large amounts of vinyl. I know there's like an attachment for it and whatnot, but that was a pretty big issue for me, especially how wide you can cut. With the US cutter, it was between like 21 inches and whatnot, just for like $400, and you can use a whole roll of vinyl. So that was a win for me. So that's why I chose that over the Cameos and whatnot. However, I see a lot of people have great results with the Cameos. So if you're looking to get into heat transfer vinyl, the pro of it is that it's fairly decent price to get into, and you can pretty much press those on any type of t-shirts, polyester, cotton, whatever it may be. However, you cannot do intricate designs. You can do 2 to 3 colors, but 2 to 3 colors can become a hassle because you have to cut the vinyl more than once. I use it for a text-based design and pretty much just a single color. So that is something you got to take into consideration, and you will need a heat press. Once again, you can start off with like a $200 cheap heat press if absolutely necessary, but I do recommend like $1,000 good brand built heat press. So heat transfer vinyl with a heat press, you can start off with like $500 if you're buying a cheap press, but you're looking more closer to around $1,000 to $1,500 if you're still buying a cheap vinyl cutter. But if you want to buy a more expensive vinyl cutter that's a little more intricate, makes less noise, a lot more accurate, you can still get accurate cuts with like one of the cheaper cutters. However, if you want to cut larger media and whatnot, you're looking around $2,000 or so for one of these good name cutters. However, this is not absolutely necessary. There's nothing wrong with those cheaper brand cutters as well. I've had them and they worked great for me. So I'm just letting you all know it is a little more expensive as well if you wanted to invest into a more expensive vinyl cutter. So the next part of heat transfer is white toner transfer printer. If you've been watching my channel, then you know I invest into that lately. So the pro of it is it's super easy and consistent. However, the super easy part, there is a learning curve, but it's probably like one of the easiest learning curves outside of like heat transfer vinyl and dye sub. Those two are super easy. You just pretty much print or cut and press. With heat transfer, it takes a little bit of technique and peeling and whatnot, but I have shared how I did that in the past couple of videos, so hopefully that helps out. However, learning all of this, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but afterwards it's very consistent. Not like direct to garment where I had issues where after going through the learning curve and printing off shirts out of the box, maybe a day or two in the inconsistencies of the actual t-shirt printing itself, nozzle clogging up and all of that type of stuff, and something breaking and being pushed back a day or two, that inconsistency was not for me. But with white toner, it's been consistent. I've already done it for about I said 2 to 3 months in the previous video, but I looked at the video, it says 2 months, and I've done roughly 3,000 t-shirts with it already. There's no way I did 3,000 prints with my direct to garment printer because it kept messing up. But with the white toner, super consistent. So that's the pro. But the con, not a huge deal for me, but I know it will be for some of y'all. It's just the results it puts out. The ink itself is not embedded into the shirt. It just kind of sits on top. However, I've never dealt with their premium papers, which leaves a bit of better results, but that paper is a little more expensive as well. So I don't know if I'm going to try it out or not. I may try all the media types out in the future. That is a video idea that I do have, so possibly. But also as well, I know some of y'all mentioned the rasterization can help out on that feel. I've tried it out, still not the greatest in feels, but super consistent. That's what matters to me. Full color, super quick, and you're not buckled down in scaling with the actual printer itself. If you want to scale, you just need some more heat presses. So that's great. Pricing and budget for this, you're going to want a decent heat press for this one right here, because you need a good heat press for that A to B Mary process. So you're looking at the least $1,000 for a decent heat press, and I believe the 550 is around 3,600 bucks or so. Oh, also another pro is that you can switch out the cartridges, at least on the lower models, not the 800, but for like dye sublimation and whatnot. So you don't need that sawgrass that I mentioned earlier if you don't want to, but you need to swap out the cartridges and whatnot. So that is another video as well. I'll compare all the different Uninet white toner transfer printers, but you're looking around 4,600 bucks or so to get into white toner, which is a pretty great deal for a full color one-off print. So those are your pricings and budgets. I said we're gonna do the pros and cons of these print methods and then dive into the budgets, but I believe I already mentioned all the pricing and budgets while talking about these print methods. So I think we're good on that part. But one thing before we end this video that I want to elaborate on, and I hope you are watching this part because this part is important and this part is what worked for me. Once again, gotta say that again. This is what worked for me. So distractions. It's easy to get distracted and having a lot on your plate. Whenever you first get into this decoration business, you want to do t-shirts, and then all of a sudden, oh man, I can make profit in hats. Oh man, I can make profits in embroidery. I can make profit in making socks. I can make profit in selling mugs. And all of this is great. There's profit margins everywhere. But then eventually you end up being the jack of all trades. I almost very recently was going to decide to get into embroidery. But then I really thought about it, watched some videos, once again, realized it's going to be another learning curve for me, and it's going to distract me from just selling t-shirts. T-shirts itself can even become a distraction. Even though you have the capability to print on more than just an adult t-shirt. You can print on a child shirt, you can print on a onesie, you can print on jerseys, the list goes on. So that itself can even be a distraction. Providing too many options for a customer, and a customer comes attacking you because you have all these options available. Hey, do you have a V-neck? Do you have this color? Do you have that color? Majority of the time, if you let the customer know ahead of time, you only have adult t-shirts, you only have black, white, and gray, guess what they're going to buy? That doesn't always necessarily mean they're going to go to someone else and find a different color. And that is how I started off. I provided too many options, and when I buckled down and tried to become the king of one trade, things started piecing together for me. And then everything else I started diving back into slowly. Like as of right now, for the most part, I'm selling just adult t-shirts. I do sell child t-shirts and onesies here and there, but I avoid V-necks. I avoid too many colors and whatnot, because for one person, a lot of this can be difficult. But like I said, a lot of this stuff is what has worked for me. I always see a lot of people whenever they dive into the t-shirt business, they always try to learn everything at once. I want to do dye sublimation, I want to do vinyl, I want to do embroidery, all of this at once, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but you're talking about like 2, 3, 4 different learning curves at once. So you can learn as you go and use which printing methods that you want for whatever item it is that you're selling, because you have so many items available to sell now. But you're gonna have headaches after headaches whenever you run into issues. I highly believe it's easier to master one print method first and make sure that it's something that you can sell. I believe we touched on this slightly earlier, that sales is the most important thing. So make sure you can even sell a t-shirt first. I would recommend to try and make sales without any equipment first. Outsource it somehow, some way, print on demand using a third-party company and using a local mom and pop company, whether you're making a small amount of profit or practically almost none. It's important that you learn how to make sales before you dive deep, because you don't need the equipment to make sales. I know that's hard to believe. As long as you have a way to fulfill it, then you can learn to make sales. So these are things that work for me. I highly suggest you focus on one thing first. If you have a vinyl cutter, you're investing into a vinyl cutter, don't rush into other stuff. Maximize on that vinyl cutter. You can make so much money just selling text-based one color print t-shirts, just adult t-shirts at that. Just make sure you maximize that equipment to its very peak until you need something else, not because you want to offer different multiple products and all of that. You can sell a lot of things with just one of those pieces of equipment. The common issue I see is that you need 10 different equipments so you can provide hundreds of different types of products so you can have more availability to the customer. But that's just going to be headache after learning curve after headache after learning curve. But you know, I do see people succeed in these things, but I do highly believe a lot more people fail or have a slower time climbing up that mountain because trying to do too much. Focus on one thing at a time. Don't be the jack of all trades, be the king of one, and then start to become the king and master all the other stuff. So, like I said, that's what worked for me. I'm pretty sure I missed some points here and there. I hope this video helped you out. Please comment, hit the like, hit the subscribe if you're not subscribed by now. Hit the notification bell if you really want to. And I'll see you next time.